So I'm Margaret Carney, Director of the International Museum of Dinnerware Design, and we welcome all of you to the Zoom program. It's our second one of 2025. And of course, Ann Bailey is going to be presenting. And we're going to do a little bit a different format this evening because frankly, when we'd seen the Bailey collection before, but when we went back again, we thought we should actually do a video of this beforehand because there's so many cases, there's so many pieces that we felt like too much time would be spent going between cases and it's a large facility. So we did a recording. So when we get to that, Anne will make a few introductory comments and then we'll show that video and then she'll be here for Q&A. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Ann Bailey to give a few introductory comments, and then we're going to show a video, a little tour of the collection, and then you can ask all your questions that you want to Ann. I have a few myself. So Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Margaret. I'm excited everyone has chosen to join us for this brief pre-recorded tour. I started collecting about 40 years ago, and my collection is pretty, centric to me, to my interests. And I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic, I'm just a passionate collector. So really what you're going to see are my interests, and it's a little Ann-centric, but that's just the way it is. You'll see some very good pieces in there. I want to thank Margaret and her husband, Bill, for putting the video together and also for their interest. I'm usually so busy, I don't really even take a breath to see what's here. And of course, anyone who comes to Bailey has the opportunity to see this collection in person. So keep that in mind if you're traveling in our area or traveling our way. This collection, what I would say, what's most important about it to me is it's given me incredible joy and focus in my life. So thank you, enjoy the video, ask questions, and I'll see you at the end of the tour.
Ann, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Let me know what your title of your talk is, From the White House to Our House. What does that have to do with what you're going to talk about today?
That's a very personal connection because when I was a young potter, I was asked to make dinnerware for the White House along with 10 other potters in America. And I felt for the first time that creative working in clay was being recognized by the world. And it was during the Carter administration, and Joan Mondale organized this incredible luncheon for the Senate's wives. And instead of choosing Lenox china, she chose American-made pottery. And so today, I am not really working in clay, but that was the beginning of my interest in the power of creativity and handmade things. And so that began this collection in many ways.
Who exactly was Joan Mondale?
Joan Mondale was the wife of the vice president, and she was an art patron and loved the arts. And Jimmy Carter was not remembered, sadly just passed, but not remembered for being an outstanding president, but actually was an outstanding human being, which is just as important as being a great leader. And she was instrumental in really promoting the arts, promoting craft art in America.
So my next question is, I would love to know about your life as a potter because that must have influenced what you did as a career, and I'd love to know about your teachers and all of that. Can you share that with me?
Sure. It definitely influenced me. I graduated from Harrow School of Art in, I think it was 1974.
And where is Harrow?
It's in London, England. And while I was there, I was studying with some of the premier potters, including Mick Casson, Colin Pearson, Wally Keeler, many Leach disciples, had workshops with David Leach. It was just a heady time. It was wonderful. So yes, that definitely influenced my thinking. A lot of that was the studio potter movement in Britain was being influenced by Bernard Leach and Soji Hamada, and the thinking that simplicity was important, but also craftsmanship was very, very important, and function was very important. So those were all the considerations in my early education in clay.
And do you have examples of some of your teachers' work in this case we're looking at right now?
I do. It's interesting. I have some of the early work, which is a lot more functional, but actually as their careers progressed, they started making more and more sculptural work. And an example of that would be Wally Keeler here, who is one of my teachers, and really just absolutely an incredible potter and craftsman. But he's taken those skills to create art. And, it references function. So for instance, this is a jug back here, or a pitcher, as we call them here, and then a teapot. But you're really not going to take this home and pour tea from it. You could, but you're not going to. You're really going to admire it for its beautiful glazing, its beautiful form, and it's just a fabulous piece. You can put your hand on it, but you've got to be aware that these are thorns and they're sharp. So then Colin Pearson down here. Colin was known for these tall shapes with wings, and he was also another teacher of mine. And at the time, he was also making functional work, a lot of functional work, but went on to make these more sculptural vessels, which are absolutely extraordinary. And down there's a little traditional Leach from the Bernard Leach studio covered dish. So that would be typical of kind of Leachware there. And this is a Soji Hamada here, who is one of the great influencers from the 40s to the craft, 1940s, to the craft movement in America. And this is a Michael Cardew. So of course, he was very influential too in his thinking, and spawned a whole generation of studio potters in England.
So Anne, I'm going to be nosy, and I'd love to know what some of your personal favorites, just in this one case.
Well, they're all my babies in many ways, and I love them all. They wouldn't be here. But I do have some real attachment to some of the pieces, and that would have to be the Kurt Weiser teapot, which I think is absolutely extraordinary. Kurt Weiser also started as a functional potter, but at some point in his career, he just started to merge narratives with and using the functional piece as a canvas. And it's so moving to me, his work. Behind is Bonnie Seaman, who at first glance you think, okay, it's a piece of lettuce or it's a piece of vegetable. Well, in fact, it's a human heart. And the way that she uses function to show detail and take you by surprise is extraordinary. Of course, Roberta Lugo, who also we brought to Kingston right before COVID. And he gave a sold-out free lecture at our city hall. And Kingston is a really progressive and wonderful city. And our mayor said, sure, bring him in. We can seat 250 up here. And that's what we did. And so he's a favorite as well. And then over here, Wally Keeler's pieces, because he was my teacher, but also an incredible potter. Dick Notkin, who came and did a lecture here a couple years back. Just an amazing person, humanitarian, and extraordinary artist. Patty Warashina, again, favorite piece, but some of these have to do with relationships too. When we were at Ensika, Jim had been very instrumental in helping Patty roll her slabs. So she invited us to her studio, and we spent a day with her. And we have another piece of hers in the other room that is incredible, absolutely extraordinary. Betty Woodman. Okay, here's an early functional piece from Betty. And I had the good fortune of knowing Betty as a potter and also as a friend. and she was a great influence in many ways on my life. John Glick down here, another amazing potter. It's now passed, sadly, but very influential in the studio potter movement in America, and also one of the potters that was at the White House when I was there many moons ago. Let's see what else. Oh, there's so many. I mean, I love them all. Oh, yeah. Colin Pearson, of course, back there. Another teacher. There's a funny little teapot made by Anne, hidden amongst the treasures. That's some of my favorite people in this case. So from this case, this is a piece by Peter Sanger, and it's quite different from what you're used to seeing. It's not functional at all, but it's sculptural, and it references the teapot, of course, but you're hardly going to be pouring tea from this. In this case, of course, there's so many extraordinary makers. They're all wonderful potters. I'm going to point out this one here by Jennifer McCurdy. She's come to Bailey twice to do workshops, and I think her handling of porcelain is extraordinary. And she has gone way beyond what is functional to what is absolutely sculptural. But she has all the craft skills and talent to know how to manipulate the clay in this way so that it becomes this incredible wave-like form. All thrown, hand thrown. Unbelievable, right? Yeah. And right behind this one is one of my favorite potters of all times, who's no longer with us, and that's Michael Simon. And that is a piece that he made probably 30 years ago now. I have a few of his pieces in my collection, and really a disciple of Warren Mackenzie. And Mackenzie, of course, you know, studied with the Leaches, so you see how it's all connected, and it continues to be connected. Many of his students also went on to great things. I'm pulling this piece from the case because this was made in the 80s by a potter named Dorothy Hafner. And she made tableware that was so extraordinary, it really blew the whole world away. So much so, they were all made by hand in her studio, that Rosenthal picked it up and did a commercial line of her work that was very, very successful. Anyway, she must always be remembered for all the innovation and patterning that she brought to clay in the 80s, 1980s. Well, as I've explained, this is a very personal collection, and I also have, there's some standouts in this case. They're all amazing pots, but really happy to have a couple representations of Maria Martinez in there, and some Acoma pottery over here, Beth Lowe here, the swimming cups, which are just extraordinary. And this potter here is Chris Staley. And Chris, Chris was a teacher at Penn State for I think about 40 years and influenced countless potters to make extraordinary work. He's an absolutely amazing potter. This is one of his pieces from the 80s. I found it at an auction early on because in the beginning I really wanted to be collecting potters that I personally really admired and had been an inspiration to me, and he was one of them, and I happened to find that about 20 years ago. I felt very lucky because it's from the 80s. Anyway, but again, great makers, all of them. Some of them customers, some of them friends, some of them I just admire.
So Anne, can you tell me a little bit about the beginning of the collection, when it happened, and how it has evolved over the years?
Sure, I'd be happy to. In the beginning, when I first started collecting pots, didn't have a lot of money, as most potters are likely to be in that situation. But one of the first pots I bought was a Karen Corns pot, and Karen was one of those very influential people in my life. And when I moved away from making pots, because I started the ceramic supply division of Bailey Pottery, I felt this need and longing to connect with the makers and the people who are making beautiful work in the clay world. So that's really the evolution of the collection. I first started with my teachers, many of my teachers that I had at Harrow, and then people that it grew from there to people who had influenced me. I had some Betty Woodman and Karen Carnes and others, and then just eventually just makers that I really loved their work. Here's one here that's not making pots anymore either. And this is Sequoia Miller. And one of the most extraordinary potters of our time. He's not making pots, but I wish somebody would tell him to get back and make some more pots. Just beautiful. So some of these I've found in galleries. The Schaller Gallery does a lot of reselling of estates, but also at auction. Some of these pieces I found at auction, and some directly from the artists. And many have been given to us as well over the years, because so many customers come here and enjoy looking at the pots. They'll say, well, I've got this pot and I'm not sure what to do with it. Would you like to show it to your customers? And I say, absolutely. So some of those pieces are here too.
Do you have a few favorites that you'd like to point out in this case that we're looking at?
Yes. This piece here is one of my favorites. This is made by Rain Harris out of Kansas City. And I saw her work, I don't know, about 10 years ago. And I was blown away by just the delicacy and the detail. Of course, this is porcelain. And that is one of my favorites right there. They're really all so amazing. I mean, I just looked through this artist here, if I can say her name. Her last name is Beauvais, but with the poppies and the beautiful brushwork, and it's just an extraordinary piece. This is a Shire piece down here, and of course they were very important in the studio pottery movement in America, and they were making pieces, I think, all the way up to the 70s. This piece here was made in the early 1960s. So again, here's the Love Fest. I love all these pots. There's so many great makers in this case as well. I'm going to point out a few historic pieces. This is a Daniel Rhodes up here, and really he put the Alfred Ceramics Department on the map. So to have a piece of his is really wonderful. Then below is Don Wright's. Of course, both these potters are no longer here, but also very influential, and influential to me as well, because he was a very dynamic potter, thrower, but also did salt clays. And in America, he was very well known for that. This piece is by Matthew Metz, and I love his work.
That's a beauty.
I think it's an extraordinary piece, and it's an earlier piece of work. And there's several of Matthew's pieces in this collection, as are his wife's, Linda Sikora. We have several of her teapots in this collection as well. This one to me is very funny. It says shit on it. I turned it around for our younger viewers. I just thought, maybe parents would be upset if they saw that. But in fact, what it's about, it's by Jessica Brandel, who was one of our great young superstars in clay. There's a coffin, and whoever was in the coffin got out. So the exclamation, instead of saying, oh my God, or OMG, there you have it. So that is kind of a funny cup. Terrell down here, I believe it's Sue Terrell, made this beautiful bird carved. We have in Kingston something called the Red Goat Award, which we give, Midtown Arts District has been giving out to extraordinary people in the arts that contribute in ways above and beyond the call of duty. She makes our Red Goat Award every year and has been doing so, I believe, for 10 years since the Midtown Arts District began. So another amazing artist. Another Don Wright's down here. So many great makers. That's a very early Wally Keeler over there. Bill Van Gilder over here. one of our great functional potters, Bill Van Gilder. And then just, you see Matthew up there again. This is Mary Frank, who is one of the first clay artists to be shown in major museums in New York City. She actually lives in this area. I love this Thomas Hoadley here. He has this amazing Japanese technique where he rolls out the clay and creates these patterns with different color clays and then reassembles them like a quilt. So Sunshine Cobb, of course, yeah. The Colemans there, Elaine Coleman, a wonderful artist in clay. So many great people. So this is a Patty Warshina piece that we purchased about 4 years ago from the Smithsonian. She donated it as a piece to help support the work that they do. I actually love Patty's work, and believe it or not, this is a teapot. So it references the function of serving tea, but of course she has her own commentary about what's going on here with the broken eggs and the egg frying and the female place in all of this. Jim and I had the great good fortune of visiting Patty about 5 years ago, and we spent the day with her in her studio, and we were able to learn a lot more about her process and her evolution as an artist. And again, she is one of the most extraordinary makers of the last 50 years, just absolutely extraordinary. And right above her, actually, as I'm looking at this, I see a David Shaner, little T-bowl there. And David also is no longer with us, but another incredible potter who influenced generations of potters as well. And he came more from that Leach Hamada tradition of making beautiful things that were functional, but went beyond function and became spiritual. Here we are, another case of beautiful pots. This one up here is a Karen Carnes. That was a gift from Karen to Jim and myself. She was a good friend and also another very influential potter, and often would stay with us when she came down here. When I was first potter, in my early years of potting, she invited me to the Old Cultural Church Center show. So I was a participant in that for many years with Karen. And so here, of course, we have the Gills, the two Gills. John Gill here, extraordinary. Andrea Gill, wonderful use of pattern and color and form. To me, she is one of the most important potters also of the last 50 years, maybe not as recognized as John, but just incredible. She is an amazing, amazing potter and was a teacher at Alfred, I think for at least 20 years. This piece here is a Ken Ferguson, and Ken was another very influential potter, taught at Kansas City Art Institute. I got this piece at auction. It's salt glazed. It's his later work, from his later work. In here, all kinds of people. Donna Passano here. This was more of a production piece from her. She also makes wonderful, one-of-a-kind pieces. In recent years, I've gotten to know her through the business, but also she does wonderful things in the community for other people, for other artists, up-and-coming artists. So I've participated in some things with her on that. This in the back here, this red pot with a handle, was made by Susie Atkins, who is from France, La Pottery du Doigt. And she was my best friend in my Harrow years in college. And we still are very close. We travel together. We look at pots around the world, which I advise everybody to do, see pots around the world. And she has one of the most important galleries in France. It's La Pottery du Doigt. Look it up. Amazing. Over here, there's a very early Wally Keeler before he really got crazy with his forms. And I love having it because it shows one, the evolution of how you can work in clay. And you can start in one mode, and that mode might be functional. And then you just push it, and you just get to an incredible place. This mug back there was made by Ladi Kawali, who was part of Cardu's pottery when he was in Abuja. So I feel very lucky to have that. It's a historic piece. He set up a pottery there, as many people know, trying to work with indigenous materials and to teach craft traditions so that people could be making work and make a living from that work. Elaine Coleman, very early here. It almost looks Art Deco. She became far more fluid with her carving, but that's a very early piece. I got that in auction. So again, Tim Rowan, another amazing person, amazing potter, amazing sculptor. He makes work right here in Ulster County. He's one of our great artists here. So
you have to tell me how many pieces you have here. This is just extraordinary.
We have over 600 pieces here in this facility in our warehouse here in Kingston, but at home we have even more. I have to say it's an obsession and a passion to collect these pieces, and also that they give incredible joy. You know, people wonder, well, why do you collect these things? Well, because it's my field, number one, and I appreciate the work, but on a deeper level, it's so wonderful to have beautiful things in your life and things that are handmade. And in the case of many potters I know, so it's just the best. It really is. Well, as you can see, there are pots everywhere, and they're interspersed with kiln shelves and kilns, and everywhere you look, there are pots. This one I'm going to pull up because this is one of the first potters I've ever met in my life when I was 18 years old. And this was made by Betty Woodman. And Betty Woodman at the time was living in Tella in the summer. And I had the great pleasure of knowing her before I became a potter. So she was an inspiration over the years. And she went on to make, and I don't have any of her latter pieces because they're way too expensive, but she went on to make extraordinary sculpture in clay and be a major force in the field. So that's Betty. Again, this is Dorothy Hafner, who I don't think gets enough credit for the work she did with tableware. And if there was a way I could get you a set of this, I will for your museum, because she
all heard that this is a promise.
She was such an influence in the 80s in tableware. And what she was doing was extraordinary. I mean, you might look at that and say, big deal. Well, at the time, this was a big deal. Most of the work was very plain and decorated in a more Asian style. And suddenly she came up with all this decorating, which just is lovely.
I remember Susie Peterson talking about her.
Yeah.
The big influences. I mean, there was Heath Pottery in California, and there was Dorothy.
Dorothy in the East. Yeah, absolutely. This is Bodil Mann's. I have several of her pieces, and again, they're very architectural, but extraordinary and slip cast, playing on, of course, function, but going way beyond function to become statements in their own right. Again, this is Chris Staley over here. Chris is just such an amazing potter. I hope he's gotten the recognition he deserves. I've been watching his work for 40 years. I actually was in a show with him in New York City at Surroundings in the 80s, early 80s, before I stopped making pots. And I had seen the work, and of course at that time I couldn't afford to buy it. I bought it later. And this is from that time period, a little bit later, maybe early 90s here. But his handling of clay, his mastery of form, and just the fluidity that he brings to his work is simply amazing. Over here, I have an early piece by Richard Batterham. Richard Batterham is English. He was a studio potter. You know, it's got a flaw, but that's okay. It's got the Richard Batterham decoration and feel. It's light as a feather. He was very important in England to many, many potters, and a person that potters looked up to for his capability in throwing, but also his mastery of firing work. So there's Richard Batterham. Now over here, you're gonna laugh. I know Chris. Chris is a friend of ours. Jim went to school with Chris at Kansas City Art Institute. But I have been looking for this piece for 20 years, since I've really picked up on my Chris Gustin. This is sorry. I assume you know who
Your friend Chris.
Yeah,
Chris
Gustin. To everyone else. But I feel very, very lucky because I found this piece in an auction. I told Jim this is my very favorite period of Chris's work. Although what Chris is making now is absolutely extraordinary, beautiful, wonderful, there's something about this piece that really speaks to me, this time period. So if he ever picks up this thread again, I'm going to be first in line. So Chris is, again, one of our great potters, one of our really, truly great potters of the last 50 years. And he's a master in throwing. He is great with glazing. He's very generous with his time to others. He fires a wood kiln out where he lives and invites people to come fire with him, which is just a wonderful potterly thing to do. There's a piece over there I want to talk about just for a second. This is not a well-known potter, but an extraordinary potter, and I'm not even sure she's the Midwest somewhere. It's Clary Ilian. She is one of the few potters that was a woman that studied with Bernard Leach. So to have this piece, and it's beautifully executed, is a real honor. And she is an extraordinary potter. I think she's still with us and hopefully still making beautiful pots like this one. Again, another extraordinary piece by a potter from Canada. Boy, I think it's Frank, if I said that right, but he does a lot of carving of salmon on his work, and then, of course, it's beautifully fired and has a lot of blushing on it from the firing process. In this case, you'll see something that's quite different for Arnie Zimmerman. Arnie was a friend of both of ours and sadly passed a few years ago. But this was a piece he made when he was in Hungary. He had been invited over as a potter to work with their traditions in porcelain. And he made some really wild and fun pieces. And that's one of the pieces there that he sold to us, which, you know, I was very pleased to have. And this is a piece that we bought at auction up at Mohawk Mountain House, for those of you that know this area. And this is made by Anat Shifton. And Anat was the teacher at SUNY New Paltz for many, many years, and is a great maker from our area and continues to make beautiful work. There's another piece of hers up here that we bought during the pottery tour from her. And up here, oh, this is fun. This is Bennett Bean. Many of you know his work. He went on to do sculptural pieces for the wall and really extraordinary work. This is an early piece of his. It was a trade, actually, with Jim for a piece of equipment. They traded, and he got that pot, which is really nice to show people, because again, it's an early piece. And there's Sue Terrell again, and there is, in fact, the goat, the famous red goat of the Midtown Arts District. And just lots of terrific, wonderful makers, like once again, in this case, all incredibly talented.
What would you like to tell us about this grouping?
This grouping, these are pots that I've probably purchased over the last 10 years.
Do you just keep adding cases every time?
I do. Don't ask Jim about that. He said, no more cases. And I said, no, I'm never giving up my addiction. Forget it. There's a lovely piece back there by Jessica Brandel. Again, somebody I really admire. Linda Arbuckle there, the yellow with the flowers. She's a very influential teacher, does a lot of workshops. David Crane, again, I think captures that essence of kind of the Leach, Mackenzie, Midwest tradition in making, and it's wood-fired, it's gorgeous. Sequoia Miller, again, the potter who no longer pots, but I do believe he is in charge of the ceramics collection at the Gardner Museum.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So it was not for nothing.
Potter's lost, but museum world.
But still doing amazing things. Yeah. And this was an interesting purchase here and here, this vase. This is the grandson of Matisse, and he's a potter. Do you know about his work? I don't know his first name, but he is in fact of that lineage and making these beautiful pots. I believe it's somewhere in the Midwest. So again, many, many great makers. They wouldn't be here if I didn't think they were terrific. They're all amazing. This was a gift from one of our customers who had been to a Betty Woodman workshop. This piece was never really finished, but this is the basis for how she made her pillow pictures. So as you see, she's strapped two pieces together here. She's with this extruded piece, and then she's thrown on this top. And although it wasn't glazed in the traditional way, it has been salt glazed. So someone threw it in the kiln instead of having her finish it, which often happens in workshops. This belonged, apparently, Provenance, Helen Drutt, and it was made by Wayne Higby. And I was lucky enough to be able to bring that to the Bailey Collection. I think Wayne is another extraordinary scholar, potter, visionary. He's done a lot for the Alfred Museum and the ceramics collection there, which is quite amazing. We've been up there a couple times. There's another piece of Wayne's over here. And this was his landscape series. He made a lot of bowls that were raku fired and captured kind of the essence of the West. And you know, if you look at it, you can see it from different ways, but it creates dimension in the piece as you look at it. We've got Chris Staley over here again. You can see I'm very fanatic about Chris Staley. This was a period later in his career, and he was making these forms that sat on slabs. And it's just lovely, of course. And over here, again, another Hamada. So this is from production ware, made in Japan. And yet again, one more Chris Staley. It's just a beautiful piece. Look at this thing. Incredible. So everyone who works here gets to see these pieces every day. And I really do believe
and watch carefully when
yes,
you go by.
It's meant to be touched.
So we're back. That was the conclusion. Anne, thank you so much.
Welcome.
I really enjoyed it. Can I ask my first question first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I remember when we were talking, not on film, but we were talking about Karen Carnes and her influence and all that. And there was more to that story, I think, about Karen.
There was more to that story, and it was the beginning. That's why White House in the title of this talk. At the time, I was a very young potter, and I had just met her. I think I was about 23 years old. And she called me and said, "Oh, Anne, I've just been asked to do this dinner set for the White House, but I don't want to, I don't make plates anymore. Would you like to do it?" So I said, would I? I sure would. So that was the beginning of a launch in my career, but also the opportunity to show my work on a much larger scale than ever would have been possible without Karen. I'm sure I was the youngest one there.
That
So
must have
I
been
have a
really
lot to thank
exciting.
her for. Yeah, it was very exciting.
I have one more question, then I'll shut up for a while. So I noticed when you were showing Rain Harris's beautiful piece, the porcelain botanical piece, that right next to it you had Lucy Ree. So I love that your juxtaposition of different beautiful pieces. And do you do that intentionally, that you put somebody next to somebody else? Do you move them
Always,
around? Do you?
always. To me, all these pieces are wonderful, and they come from that place of the heart and the hand, and of really working hard to get to a place of perfection in my eyes. And so I think they all belong together. They all lift each other. They all speak to each other. I think of them as friends in there.
So when you close up Bailey Pottery Equipment at nighttime, they're having a conversation when
Sure
you're
are.
very cool. So I think Bill is monitoring questions that are in the chat, and also
Yeah.
people can raise your hands if you have questions, or you can put more questions in the chat. So I'm turning it over to Bill to ask you things.
Yeah, I guess I have a question that's kind of a follow-up to Margaret's earlier question. And, I remember when I was probably in high school, my dad reading the paper and probably the New York Times talking about how Joan Mondale was really interested in the crafts. And could you say something about what it was like to be around at that time when the crafts pottery was kind of elevated to the point where it was, in the White House?
Yeah, I'll speak to it on a very personal level. I think it was an amazing time because the whole world was opening up. We'd had a terrible time of strife with the Vietnam War. We had protests. We were just going through an awakening. We'd had Woodstock. We had Stonewall, we had Black Power movement, we had women's liberation, we had birth control, we had all kinds of things that were going on that really were manifesting in fabulous ways. And so what I would say is the door was wide open when Joan Mondale came through, and she made it almost like a mission to inform people how important the work that people were doing by hand, the value of it, how American, how it had manifested. And she really wanted to celebrate it. So she went all over the country talking about the power of what I call craft, but it was also craft art. The interesting thing about that time period is that a lot of people were going to art school, and instead of taking the more traditional route with their studies, they were working with new materials. Clay was one of those materials. As part of the revolution, as part of Back to the Earth, as part of experimenting and doing something new and different. So to me, it was a very exciting time.
And she was a potter also, correct?
I believe so. But mostly she was an ambassador. She went around and promoted art and craft and just create the creative life.
I remember she got an honorary degree from Alfred, I think, as a potter. And one time when I was in Tokyo, we went to, and Fritz was the ambassador there. He wasn't in town, but Joan had myself and the president of Alfred University and the dean of the College of Ceramics over for lunch. And I remember sitting there and tempting, and I actually turn the china over to see whether it was Lenox or Bill's going to have to fill in the one by Chicago. What was the other? Oh, yeah, Picard. And it was Lenox. But anyway, she was amazing, amazing. And so wonderful that you participated in that magic moment.
So there's a comment in the chat that Joan Mondale is an honorary member of NCECA. and she attended some
Right.
of the conferences.
Yeah, yeah, I met her there one year. So, yeah.
Are there more questions in the chat, Bill? I'm not
Yes,
looking at.
there are some comments. Thank you so much for sharing all those beautiful pieces. What an extraordinary collection. Thank you for presenting it.
You're welcome.
And there's another question. Do you have a holy grail that you haven't had a chance to acquire?
Oh, well, yeah, I think everybody has kind of those things. I just keep my heart and my eyes open. There are people I really, really admire, and I can't own everyone's work. I wish I could. And the longer I stay in it, the more I see. The longer I collect, the more I understand. So it's been a tremendous journey for me, just in terms of learning. So, you know, something for personal reasons. And I love what we have. And I always keep my eyes open for other things.
I remember when we were touring through that I would say, we were in front of one case and all of a sudden it would occur to me, oh, do you have any Harrison McIntosh? Do you have any whatever? And of course you did. You had anybody that popped into my head, the next case there they'd be. So
I have been, I keep planning to catalog all this, you know, that may sound kind of haphazard. The pieces are actually marked underneath where they came from and who they are and that sort of thing. But I haven't actually done it as a catalog that people could look through. Because a lot of people come through, I hear, and want to know who the makers are, and I'm sorry they're not labeled, and I have friends that would scold me for that. Museum people, because they're not labeled. But the great joy has been in presenting them. It's been a very casual collection. I don't want to make any claims to being academic or scholarly about this. It's just a passion, and you can feel it when you look at the collection, I think.
So you mentioned that you have some pieces at home as well.
Mhm.
One of the comments, I would love to see that part of the collection too.
Okay.
There's also a question, are the pieces at home better than the ones that are at the business?
No, and I move them around. Sometimes the pieces that I have at home, for instance, why can't I think of her name? A very famous potter. I have brought her here, her pot here, Robinson, Adelaide. But I keep it at home because sometimes I want to see it there. It depends where I'm going to be, because a lot of this has to do with me and where I want to see these pots. But the pots at home, what I would say that I have there that's quite different. I have a lot of antique Asian pottery, which I really admire, from the 1600s to maybe the 1900s. I also have a lot of Native American pottery. One of my favorite pots is by Rainy Naha, and you didn't see that in this collection, but I look at it every day. It's in my house, but I have had it here. And even Kurt's piece, Kurt Weiser, that typically might be in my living room. But if I want to bring it here to look at it here, I'll move it, and then I'll move whatever was in its place back home. So that's how it works.
So do you have any Hans Koper or Robin Hopper?
I have Hans Koper. I don't have Robin Hopper. I think Robin Hopper was a great teacher and a big influence in Canada. And a lot of people studied his glaze book, and I met him a few times. But yes, Hans Koper, yes, I do have.
There's a message, one of the messages says that the Marks Project might be interested in the marks.
In the mark?
The marks on your collection.
Oh, perhaps. I'm a supporter of the Marks Project. I'm aware of it, and I think it's a wonderful project. And I'm really glad they're doing this. I would say in England, the pottery is very well documented there. and all the marks. You know, if you buy a piece, you can look it up and it's cataloged and you know exactly who made the piece very quickly. So I'm hoping we can do that here too. It's a great project.
So what do you enjoy eating off of on a daily basis?
I have some Shino bowls that I eat out of almost every day. And I will never say the name right, so I'm not going to try to say it. And I also have some Singwald plates that are fabulous. Use those. I also have some traditional china, Danish china ware, Royal Copenhagen, which I save for special occasions. I have a wonderful mug collection, maybe 20 different makers in the cabinet. And that would depend on my mood. And every time I use those pieces, I think of the maker, and it makes it a very personal experience each and every day.
So I have one last question, and I think it may be saving the best question for last. How do you dust the pots?
Yeah, I want to know that.
Well, it's difficult, especially here in the building, because we're right next to the train tracks and our building shakes. So we have a certain amount of dust here. But because the cases are closed, pots don't get as dusty as you might imagine. And I get in there. No one touches them except for me. I get in there about every 3 or 4 months and just go through with a little bit of a soft cloth. And I move very carefully around them. And if there's dust on top, I just, take it off. And I want them to look good when people see them. So I do take the dust off.
I'll just ask one last question. So do your employees that work at Bailey Pottery, do they love the pots as much as you do?
I hope they do. I try to leave a lot of them out, and everybody does look at them. I think our customers certainly enjoy them. We hear that a lot. Anyone can come here and make an appointment to visit the collection anytime. I think they do. I think beautiful things rub off on people, and people know how joyful I am from them. And I think that rubs off.
Anne, I want to thank you very much for sharing the Bailey Pottery Equipment collection with us. It was fantastic. And I think now we have a warning that there might be another part 2 sometime, if you allow it.
Fair warning, I'll have to clean the house.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending, and thank you so much, Anne. This has been fantastic.
You're welcome. It's been fun. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.